Baba and the 40 Thieves, Part 4. Meanwhile, the robber captain had fled back to the forest. Entering the cave, he was overcome by its gloom and loneliness. "Alas," he cried, "my comrades, partners in my adventures, sharers of my fortune! How shall I endure to live without you? Why did I lead you to a fate where valor was of no avail, and where death turned you into objects of ridicule? Surely had you died sword in hand, my sorrow had been less bitter. And now, what remains for me but to take vengeance for your death, and to prove, by achieving it without aid, that I was worthy to be the captain of such a band?" Thus resolved, at an early hour the next day, he assumed a disguise suitable to his purpose, and going to the town, took lodging in a khan. Entering into conversation with his host, he inquired whether anything of interest had happened recently in the town, but the other, though full of gossip, had nothing to tell him concerning the matter in which he was most interested, for Ali Baba, having to conceal from all the source of his wealth, had also to be silent as to the dangers in which it involved him. The captain then inquired where there was a shop for hire, and hearing of one that suited him, he came to terms with the owner, and before long had furnished it with all kinds of rich stuffs and carpets and jewelry, which he brought by degrees with great secrecy from the cave. Now this shop happened to be opposite to that which had belonged to Cassim, and was now occupied by the son of Ali Baba. So before long the son and the newcomer, who had assumed the name of Khoja Hussain, became acquainted, and as the youth had good looks, kind manners, and a sociable disposition, it was not long before the acquaintance became intimate. Khoja Hussain did all he could to seal the pretended friendship, the more so as it had not taken him long to discover how the young man and Ali Baba were related. So, plying him constantly with small presents and acts of hospitality, he forced on him the obligation of making some return. Ali Baba's son, however, had not at his lodging sufficient accommodation for entertainment. He therefore told his father of the difficulty in which Khoja Hussain's favors had placed him, and Ali Baba with great willingness at once offered to arrange matters. "My son," said he, "tomorrow being a holiday, all shops will be closed. Then do you after dinner invite Khoja Hussain to walk with you, and as you return, bring him this way and beg him to come in. That will be better than a formal invitation, and Morgiana shall have a supper prepared for you." This proposal was exactly what Ali Baba's son could have wished. So on the morrow he brought Khoja Hussain to the door as if by accident, and, stopping, invited him to enter. Khoja Hussain, who saw his object thus suddenly attained, began by showing pretended reluctance, but Ali Baba himself coming to the door, pressed him in the most kindly manner to enter, and before long had conducted him to the table, where food stood prepared. But there an unlooked-for difficulty arose. Wicked though he might be, the robber captain was not so impious as to eat the salt of the man he intended to kill. He therefore began with many apologies to excuse himself, and when Ali Baba sought to know the reason, "Sir," said he, "I am sure that if you knew the cause of my resolution, you would approve of it. Suffice it to say that I have made it a rule to eat of no dish that has salt in it. How then can I sit down at your table if I must reject everything that is set before me?" "If that is your scruple," said Ali Baba, "it shall soon be satisfied." And he sent orders to the kitchen that no salt was to be put into any of the dishes presently to be served to the newly arrived guest. "Thus," said he to Khoja Hussain, "I shall still have the honor, to which I have looked forward, of returning to you under my own roof the hospitality you have shown to my son." Morgiana, who was just about to serve supper, received the order with some discontent. "Who," she said, "is this difficult person that refuses to eat salt? He must be a curiosity worth looking at." So when the saltless courses were ready to be set upon the table, she herself helped to carry in the dishes. No sooner had she set eyes on Khoja Hussain than she recognized him in spite of his disguise, and observing his movements with great attention, she saw that he had a dagger concealed beneath his robe. "Ah," she said to herself, "here is reason enough. For who will eat salt with the man he means to murder? But he shall not murder my master, if I can prevent it." Now Morgiana knew that the most favorable opportunity for the robber captain to carry out his design would be after the courses had been withdrawn, and when Ali Baba and his son and guest were alone together over their wine, which indeed was the very project that Khoja Houssain had formed. Going forth, therefore, in haste, she dressed herself as a dancer, assuming the headdress and mask suitable for the character. Then she fastened a silver girdle about her waist, and hung upon it a dagger of the same material. Thus equipped, she said to Abdallah the cook, "Take your tabor, and let us go in and give an entertainment in honor of our master's guest." So Abdallah took his tabor and played Morgiana into the hall. As soon as she had entered, she made a low curtsy and stood awaiting orders. Then Ali Baba, seeing that she wished to perform in his guest's honor, said kindly, "Come in, Morgiana, and show Khoja Houssain what you can do." Immediately Abdallah began to beat upon his tabor and sing an air for Morgiana to dance to, and she, advancing with much grace and propriety of deportment, began to move through several figures, performing them with the ease and facility which none but the most highly practised can attain to. Then, for the last figure of all, she drew out the dagger, and holding it in her hand, danced a dance which excelled all that had preceded it in the surprise and change and quickness and dexterity of its movements. Now she presented the dagger at her own breast, now at one of the onlookers, but always in the act of striking, she drew back. At length, as though out of breath, she snatched his instrument from Abdallah with her left hand, and, still holding the dagger in her right, advanced the hollow of the tabor toward her master, as is the custom of dancers when claiming their fee. Ali Baba threw in a piece of gold, his son did likewise. Then, advancing it in the same manner toward Khoja Houssain, who was feeling for his purse, she struck under it, and before he knew had plunged her dagger deep into his heart. Ali Baba and his son, seeing their guest fall dead, cried out in horror at the deed. "Wretch!" exclaimed Ali Baba, "what ruin and shame hast thou brought on us?" "Nay," answered Morgiana, "it is not your ruin, but your life that I have thus secured. Look, and convince yourself what man was this which refused to eat salt with you." So saying, she tore off the dead robber's disguise, showing the dagger concealed below, and the face which her master now for the first time recognized. Ali Baba's gratitude to Morgiana for thus preserving his life a second time knew no bounds. He took her in his arms and embraced her as a daughter. "Now," said he, "the time is come when I must fulfill my debt, and how better can I do it than by marrying you to my son?" This proposition, far from proving unwelcome to the young man, did but confirm an inclination already formed. A few days later the nuptials were celebrated with great joy and solemnity, and the union thus auspiciously commenced was productive of as much happiness as lies within the power of mortals to secure. As for the robber's cave, it remained the secret possession of Ali Baba and his posterity, and using their good fortune with equity and moderation, they rose to high office in the city and were held in great honor by all who knew them. "What an incredible story!" exclaimed the Sultan when Scheherazade had finished. "That is nothing to the story I can tell you tomorrow," she replied, "if you spare my life for one more night." So it went on, night after night, for 1,001 nights. By the time Scheherazade's imagination was finally exhausted, the Sultan realized that it had been long since he had even considered executing this beautiful and gifted storyteller. On the contrary, he had fallen in love with her, and wished to spend the rest of his days with her. They lived happily ever after.